Hello, and welcome to this week's Ethical Dilemma in Science, where we're going to take a look at some concerns and questions around generic drugs and ask a general question. Are we improving access to medications or are we limiting innovative new drug research? And again, this is timely. It's in the news this month, as well as it relates to the topics that are being covered in class this week and next week, where we're taking a look at disease prevention and treatment. And so what is it that is the basis for this week's Ethical Dilemma in Science? Lots of news accounts coming out in February related to Mark Cuban's efforts to provide an online pharmacy to deliver generic drugs at a greatly reduced price. Now, this isn't to focus on Mark Cuban and his company, but just a little bit of background. Mark Cuban is a billionaire entrepreneur. He's a judge on the television show Shark Tank, as well as owner of the Dallas Mavericks basketball team. And he's a big proponent of kind of giving back to society and contributing to a whole variety of other efforts to kind of improve the human condition. If we take a look at this is, again, not a commercial for the website, but the CostPlus drug company as an example of a generic drug initiative. We can see things, drugs like fluoxetine, which is a generic for Prozac, coming in at a treatment of about $4 as opposed to $23 as a retail price. Sertraline, another prescription or a generic drug, a prescription drug for depression, the generic for Zoloft, coming in at about $4 for a month as opposed to $74 as the retail price. And then even more dramatically, vancomycin here in the middle, taking a look at an antibiotic to treat colitis. Colitis is an inflammation of the intestines. A treatment of this is going to be about $32 as opposed to $680. And so we're seeing that with this provision of generic drugs, we're seeing a very dramatic reduction in the cost that either insurance companies or patients need to pay to get needed medications. Now, if we take a look at this, what is the issue? What is the gap that is being addressed in this effort? And so basically what we're looking at is this concept of medication insecurity. Now, medication insecurity is when a patient is unable to afford their prescriptions. And so we may see that individuals may skip their treatments completely or reduce a dose, break a pill in half to make it extend longer, maybe skip a dose here and there. And it really impacts on the ability of the drug to treat the important condition that the patient should be taking this for. Now, recent surveys, Gallup News poll coming out earlier in 2020, takes a look at this, and it's estimated that about 7% of the U.S. population at any point in time is unable to pay for at least one of their medications. Somewhat surprisingly, individuals under the age of 65 are about twice as likely as seniors to be unable to pay. And so we can see that this medication insecurity is highest for those that are often in most need for these prescriptions. We can see that for households earning less than $24,000, this percentage, the average percentage, about 7% of U.S. adults, rises to almost 20% in those individuals with a lower family income. A large number of individuals, as I said, have skipped prescribed doses in an effort to preserve drugs, extend the treatment over a longer period of time, or an effort to save money. And this basically puts them in a situation of not being able to get better because they're not taking the medication in the way that it's been prescribed. Now, last year, actually 2 years ago now in 2020, the Colorado Attorney General was instructed by the legislature to look at drug costs, specifically taking a look at insulin costs. He collected a lot of information from drug manufacturers and pharmacy benefit managers. These are the companies that manage drug benefits for your health insurers, the healthcare coverage that you have, outsources the prescription drug coverage to another company. And what they saw, again, and the exact type of medications, insulin in this case, isn't important, but you can basically see that the prices, and this is running from 2006 over to 2019, they're not staying stable. They're going up pretty dramatically. And according to this report by, again, the Colorado Attorney General's office, is showing that the cost for insulin is increasing at about 12.6% per year, so roughly 4 times the rate of inflation. And you think about it, 4 times, even if you're getting a cost of living increase linked to inflation, it is greatly outpacing the increase in salary that would be coming, again, contributing to this concept of insecurity. And so you can see that these medications are very dramatically increasing in price, even though we're seeing an increase in options available to patients. And so what is the issue? Why are drugs so expensive? Lots of different ideas, lots of different contributors associated with this. We'll take a look at one in this example. And so basically what we're taking a look at is that drug developers, the companies that are developing a new drug, are given a protected period of time in which they can market this new drug without competition. And so if we take a look at, there are actually 2 levels of protection that are going to be available. So when a drug is newly kind of discovered, when they start working at describing it, trying to determine whether or not it is going to be effective for the treatment of the disease they're looking at, the drug company will apply for a patent. And once they apply for that patent, they get 20 years of protection, protecting their intellectual property, the kind of knowledge involved with creating this new drug. Now, this 20 years is provided by the government in the patent protections, and this is separate from the protections that are provided by the Food and Drug Administration. And so if we take a look at this, as they develop a new drug, they file for patent protection for 20 years, but before they can market that drug, they've got to be able to show that it's safe and effective. And so in order to be able to do that, they're going to go through preclinical testing, lost my pointer, phase 1 trials for a couple of years, phase 2 trials, all of which we've heard about very extensively with the COVID vaccine rollout over the last couple of years, phase 3 trials, and then finally, once they've completed the phase 3 trials under normal circumstances, then they apply for FDA approval. Now, that FDA approval could take a year, 2 years, maybe averages about a year and a half. And at that point, basically at this point right over here, the company has the ability to market the drug, to make it available to patients. But at this point, oftentimes that 20-year patent protection period is almost over. And so they've got a limited amount of time to recoup their investments in research and development. And so what the Food and Drug Administration has provided is an exclusivity marketing period, an exclusivity period here of about 5 to 7 years. 5 years for a new drug, 7 years for an orphan drug, for a drug treating kind of a low number of patients within a year. I think the number is about 200,000 patients within the United States. So the likelihood of them recouping their funds is much lower, so they have an extended period of time. And so that brand name drug will be available during this exclusivity period and potentially after that period as well. But then once that exclusivity period provided by the FDA is over, and hopefully the patent protection is over as well, then we can take a look at additional companies going through and develop generics. And so the generic drugs will become available at the expiration of the patent protection period and that exclusivity period. And so if we take a look at what are these generic drugs, basically a generic medication works exactly the same way as a brand name medication. It has the same clinical benefit. And so it has the same dosage, same form. So if it's a pill or a capsule, it's going to be in the same kind of format that you're going to be getting it in. The route of administration is going to be the same. Safety, effectiveness, the strength of the drug, the dosage of the drug, the labeling is all going to be consistent with the brand name medication. The difference, though, is that a new drug has to go through a new drug application process in which they have to go through and do a whole lot of things that still have to be done for a generic, But in addition, they have to show that through animal studies, clinical studies, and bioavailability studies that the drug works, that the drug is safe and effective for the treatment of that disease. Now, for a generic drug, they don't have to go through that animal testing, the clinical testing, and the bioavailability. All they have to do is show that their drug, the generic drug, is biologically equivalent to the brand name drug. And so their development costs are much lower than the research and development of a new drug. In addition, the brand name drug went through a very elaborate new drug application process where a generic will go through an abbreviated new drug application process. Now, they still have to show that they meet the high standards of quality in manufacturing, but they could have, slight differences in some of the, inert or inactive ingredients with it, kind of what's in the capsule, what are some of the stabilizing materials, things like that. But in all, what we see is that a generic medication is exactly the same. It has the same effect as the brand name medication, but the cost investing in getting it started are going to be much lower, and so potentially these generic brands or generic drugs are able to provide their medications at a much lower cost. And you see this in your pharmacies where the generic medications are often at a lower price than the brand name medications. And so if we take a look at this, again, going back to the CostPlus drug company, Mark Cuban's company, again, not as a commercial, but to take a look at it. And so in this case, they're outlining, I probably mispronounced this, imatinib. It's a chemotherapy drug for the treatment of leukemia and other cancers and disorders of the bloodstream. And basically, the retail price for that in other pharmacies is almost $9,600, $9,700 a month, where they're looking at it as or a 30-day count, so a month's worth. They're looking at it at being under $50. So how are they able to do that? Basically, they have partnered with another pharmacy fulfillment partner, and so they're basically buying these drugs wholesale. They're buying them at cost, the manufacturer's cost plus a little bit of their own markup, and then they are paying for it. They're providing a fixed kind of profit margin of 15%, and then they partner with a pharmacy to provide that. And so they provide a $3 per prescription to cover the costs of the pharmacy. Now, because they are doing it in this model, they are not accepting insurance. And so even though the costs are paid out of pocket, they're going to be much lower than, in many cases, much lower than the insurance plan deductible and copay requirements. Now, there are problems with this. If you have to hit a certain deductible level with your insurance plan, taking these medications here as opposed to taking it from the pharmacy, you're not going to be able to get the same kind of addition to your deductible, so you're going to have to pay a little bit more to doctor's visits and things like that to hit your deductible to have certain levels of coverage kicking in. But basically, we're looking at a model in which they have a fixed level of profit. And as Mark Cuban said in a Healthline report, his goal is to make a profit while maximizing impact. He still has to make a profit to make this company sustainable and keep it going and successful going forward. But we're not seeing kind of a large amount of profit because they're not doing research and development. Now, having said that, they are currently purchasing generic drugs from other manufacturers, but they're in the process of building their own drug manufacturing facility to hopefully reduce the cost even more by being able to manufacture it on their own. And so we take a look at this. The question then becomes this ethical dilemma in science. Should fair and equitable access to medications be considered a public health service? And so if we take a look at this over here on the right-hand portion of this, and I apologize, it's really small. I've actually cut the figure in half to make it fit on the slide, and it's still too small to really see it. What we can see in the darker bands is what is paid by the U.S. government through the Medicare program, and this lighter color band, which is pretty dramatically reduced over all of these, is what the Veterans Administration, again a U.S. government agency, pays for their medications. So the same medication, two different programs within the government are providing for it. And so what we can see is that the VA is able to negotiate lower prices for these medications, but currently Medicare is blocked from being able to do that by law. Now, there are efforts to change that. President Biden has outlined a plan to allow Medicare to negotiate prices similar to what the VA is doing. And it's estimated in this paper that doing that could save Medicare upwards of about $14 billion, billion with a B, over just the top 50 dispensed oral drugs. If they go simply with what the price is that the Veterans Administration has negotiated. And so there are efforts out there to try to come up with different ways. Mark Cuban has come up with one way, but other ways in which we can reduce the costs of these important medications. And so the question becomes, how do you balance the needs of pharmaceutical companies, the companies that are doing these the research and development to create new drugs? They need to post a profit. Many of them are publicly held companies, and so their investors want to see a profit increase in their return, as well as they need to have funds to invest for future research and development of new medications. And so they need to have a profit to be able to do those things. Government, and I would extend this out to insurance companies, they want to minimize long-term healthcare costs and societal costs of what I'm putting in quotes, an unwell population. Individuals that are not taking their preventative medications, individuals that are not taking their medications as scheduled and at the doses scheduled, are likely not to be getting better or are likely to see an exacerbation of their health conditions, and that could contribute to a whole variety of things. But one of those things is that lack of access to preventative and maintenance health care results in an increase in healthcare costs over the long term, even to the point of individuals becoming disabled, and at that point additional societal costs associated with that in supporting those individuals. In addition, we've got patients. Patients, they don't want to be sick. Patients want to have a good quality of life, but in many cases, the quality of life that comes from taking their medication comes at a cost. They may have to, forego, supporting their family in order to have their medications. And for many individuals, the decision comes down to, do they take their medication or do they provide for their family? And as we saw in that survey, many times that decision is to forego their medication in order to be able to support their family. And so they're not doing what is best for them. So how do we balance these needs? How do we provide the medications that are needed and still meet the needs of all of these different individuals, different groups? Again, some references that I'll put in the links down below. And so hopefully this has been informative, valuable to you. Please come back for next week where we'll have another ethical dilemma in science. As always, thank you. And if you're interested in more information, please see the information posted below. Thank you and have a great week.